Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my channel. I am Ben. Today, we step into a chilling true crime case, the discovery of a lifeless body during the Lunar New Year, found bound in yellow tape and hidden beneath heavy quilts. Ordinary objects inside the apartment. A wristwatch stopped at 11 past 11, a stack of untouched newspapers, and even two toothbrushes resting side by side raised questions that no one could answer. What really happened in that silent home when the city outside was celebrating reunion? Let us begin. In the bustling city of Shanghai, one of China's earliest and most prosperous urban centers, countless stories unfolded quietly in the early 2000s. Millions of migrants had already left their rural homes to seek work, filling the city's endless construction sites, factory dormitories, and cramped rented rooms. Amid the sound of machines, the clatter of bicycles, and the fatigue of 12-hour shifts, people formed fragile connections, sometimes genuine, sometimes deceptive. And it was within this fragile balance of trust and betrayal that one of the city's most haunting murder cases emerged. On the morning of February 15th, 2002, the second day of the Lunar New Year, when Shanghai's streets were still bright with red lanterns and the air echoed with firecrackers of celebration, a disturbing call reached the local police. Residents of a crowded apartment block reported a strange odor coming from the flat of a man named Lu. For days, the stench had grown heavier. On the first day of the new year, the neighbors hesitated who would dare knock on someone's door during a festive visit, only to complain of a foul smell. But by the second day, concern overcame courtesy. They knocked repeatedly. When no one answered, they pushed the door open and found a scene that chilled their blood. Lu was dead. Within minutes, homicide detectives and forensic specialists rushed to the address. Number 16, Building 672, Chang Le Road, a dense and aging residential complex. The victim's apartment was on the 7th floor, the very top, where Lu lived alone after his divorce. He was 44 years old, a solitary man, known to keep to himself. The apartment consisted of two main rooms. The northern side was a living room, while the southern space was divided into a small bedroom, a skylight well, and a bathroom. It was in the bedroom, in a corner bed, that police discovered Lu's body. He was lying on his side, face pressed into the mattress, his wrists and ankles cruelly bound behind his back with yellow tape. Over his body lay two thick cotton quilts, hastily pulled to cover the corpse. What unsettled the officers most was not only the brutality, but also the quietness of the room. The bedroom door showed no signs of forced entry. Neighbors said the door had been merely ajar, not locked. Inside, the cabinet drawers bore marks of being pried open. Splintered wood showed desperate searching, yet nothing of value remained, just a few old CDs and scattered trinkets. On a desk against the eastern wall sat a computer and a printer. Next to it lay a set of keys that could open the very cabinet drawers now damaged. In the bathroom sink, investigators noticed something stranger still. A toothbrush resting on porcelain, bristles already coated with fresh toothpaste but abandoned mid-act, as though someone had been about to brush their teeth when something urgent forced them to flee. On the edge of the sink were two plastic cups. In one, a red cup, sat a tube of toothpaste. In the other, a clear cup, stood another toothbrush, bristles pointing downward. Two toothbrushes in a home where the man supposedly lived alone. Could someone else have been staying there, unnoticed by the neighbors? Perhaps a guest who came only occasionally, slipping in and out without drawing attention. By evening, while Shanghai's streets still buzzed with firecrackers and crowds carrying New Year flowers, homicide detectives convened an emergency meeting. The clues painted a troubling picture. The doors bore no signs of forced entry, suggesting the killer had been let in willingly. The forensic report confirmed death by suffocation, caused by tape around the neck. There were no signs of struggle, raising two grim possibilities. Either the killer had been overwhelmingly stronger than Lu, or there had been more than one assailant. Investigators studied the knots in the yellow tape. The bindings on the wrists and the ligature around the neck bore different knotting styles, reversed patterns that one person would not naturally produce. This detail, simple but damning, strongly suggested at least two killers were present in the room that night. The crime scene still raised puzzling questions that refused to fade. One of the most debated details was a small but telling one: the set of keys placed neatly on top of the printer. Those keys could have easily opened the drawers of the television cabinet, yet the killer had chosen to pry them open instead. Why would anyone waste the extra time and effort forcing the drawers if the keys were right there? Investigators speculated endlessly. If the perpetrator had been a close acquaintance of Lu, he would have known the keys fit the cabinet. Perhaps then, the killer was not truly close to him, someone who visited casually, but not often enough to understand how the apartment was arranged. During the detective's late-night meeting, with cigarette smoke curling through the dim room and notes scattered across the table, this question recurred again and again. Still, the most urgent topic that divided them fiercely was the time of death. Winter in Shanghai was bitterly cold. Forensic specialists, limited by the technology of the time, could only estimate that Lu had been dead between 6 to 8 days. Narrowing that down was crucial, for the window of death would determine the list of suspects. The newspapers offered the first clue. On the tea table in the living room lay a copy dated the 8th day of the Lunar New Year. In front of the apartment door, however, a pile of unopened papers stretched from the 9th to the 15th. In those years, before the internet dominated, families still relied on printed papers delivered to their homes at the same time every morning, around 10:30. From this, detectives inferred that Lu was alive on the morning of the 8th, but likely never saw the newspaper delivered on the 9th. This detail pushed the estimated time of death into a narrow span, sometime between the late morning of the 8th and before 10 on the 9th. Yet another clue came from something that had been overlooked at first: the watch on Lu's wrist. It was not a battery-powered piece, but a mechanical self-winding watch, the kind that drew energy from daily wrist movements. Such watches required at least 8 hours of wear each day to remain wound. Without it, the mechanism would stop within less than 2 days. Lu's watch had stopped at 11:40 at night on the 10th. To test its limit, detectives wound it fully, wore it during the day, then set it aside. After 3 controlled trials, the results were clear. The watch consistently stopped 37 to 38 hours after being removed. Counting back, Lu's death had most likely occurred between 8 and 10 in the morning on the 9th, almost precisely when the newspapers were left untouched at his door. With this timeline, investigators shifted focus. Who had visited Lu on the morning of February 9th? Records and witness accounts identified the victim as Lu Daisheng, 44 years old, originally from Zhejiang province. He had lived alone in Shanghai since 1999 after his parents passed away, estranged even from a stepmother with whom relations had long soured. Independent and quiet, he partnered with several friends to run an interior decoration company, overseeing design work. With a sharp eye for aesthetics and solid professional skill, business had gone smoothly, and clients came steadily. But just 3 years after founding the company, Lu was dead. Colleagues described him as introverted, withdrawn. He answered politely when spoken to but never initiated conversation, never lingered for gossip. He had no close relatives in Shanghai, only a few casual friends. Yet among his workers, one man stood out: Hong Bingwei from Jiangxi province. He had apprenticed at the company for nearly a year and was closer to Lu than anyone else. At one time, when lodging was scarce, Hong had even stayed at Lu's apartment. But from the 30th of January, 10 days before Lu's death, Hong had vanished from the workshop. Word spread that he had returned to his hometown to marry. Oddly, not even Lu was invited, despite their closeness. To some, this felt inconsistent with Hong's usual personality. Normally cheerful and generous, Hong had once spent half a month's wages hosting a birthday feast for co-workers in December. That he would celebrate his own wedding quietly, without a single guest from work, seemed suspicious. His explanation that the wedding was small and family only, and that Jiangxi was too far for colleagues to travel, rang hollow to many ears. Still, one fact complicated matters. Hong had last been seen at the end of January, more than a week before Lu's suspected time of death. Could he really be involved? Police were divided. Some officers were assigned to trace Hong's whereabouts, while others continued examining Lu's social and business ties. But those ties were disappointingly sparse. No girlfriend, no extended circle of friends, and little contact with neighbors. Investigators concluded the answer likely lay in his work relationships. Before the murder, Lu often hired short-term laborers from neighboring provinces like Anhui, Jiangxi, and Hunan. They came for temporary projects and then disappeared. Tracking them would be difficult. It meant moving across provinces, knocking on doors, and retracing every fleeting connection. Though Hong Bingwei had only joined as an apprentice not long before, his intelligence and quick learning had earned him Lu's trust. With a college degree, he was promoted unusually fast, taking responsibility for supervising project schedules and earning a relatively high salary. This closeness made him a person of interest in the eyes of the investigators. On February 17, 2002, only 2 days after Lu's body was discovered, the Special Task Force divided into 3 teams. One team headed to Anhui, another to Hunan, and the most important group traveled directly to Jiangxi to locate Hong. Once in Jiangxi, detectives split into 2 subgroups, one to find Hong himself, the other to trace workers from Jiangxi who had once been employed by Lu. The results were surprising. Hong had indeed left Shanghai on January 30th to return to his hometown for his wedding. Since then, he had stayed at home, essentially on a honeymoon, rarely stepping outside. His alibi appeared strong, and no evidence suggested he had time to travel back to Shanghai to commit the crime. When questioned, Hong seemed genuinely shocked at Lu's death. He described Lu as a mentor and almost like an older brother, someone who had once given him lodging when he had no place to stay, someone who had been fair and supportive. He firmly denied any motive to harm him. As for not inviting colleagues to the wedding, Hong explained with hesitation. First, the distance from Shanghai to Jiangxi was too great, and even if invited, most people would likely just send money rather than attend, which embarrassed him. Second, his bride had been divorced and already had a child. He did not want co-workers to gossip about it, as he planned to continue working at the company after marriage. For these reasons, he had excused himself by saying the road was too far. Though Hong's alibi seemed convincing, police still brought him back to Shanghai on February 18th to assist with the investigation. He might not be the killer, but his closeness to Lu meant he might hold valuable knowledge about the victim's life. Through Hong's testimony, a more complete portrait of Lu emerged. Despite his reserved nature, he was fair and generous. Workers who labored even a single day were paid promptly, and those returning home received extra travel money. He lived frugally, donating more than half his earnings to orphanages and charities for the elderly. Though he seldom expressed emotions, his actions spoke of kindness and integrity. Then Hong remembered something that seemed trivial at the time but now felt significant. 2 years earlier, Lu had once been involved in a bitter quarrel with a man surnamed Jin, a dispute born not of business but of romance. According to Lu's account, Jin had physically attacked him after discovering that Lu, unknowingly, had been involved with the same woman. When the truth surfaced, Lu immediately broke off the relationship, unwilling to compete for affection. Yet Jin continued to harbor suspicion and jealousy, often threatening and watching Lu, fearful he might rekindle ties with the woman. Detectives followed up. At the time of the murder, Jin was running a stall in a major Shanghai shopping mall, but records showed he had traveled to Yunnan to arrange matters for his family's ancestral grave. His alibi checked out. He was dismissed as a suspect. Police then showed Hong the toothbrush found in Lu's bathroom, the one that puzzled them. Hong denied it was his. He explained that before leaving on January 30th, he had gathered all his personal belongings, intending not to live with Lu anymore once he returned to Shanghai. With a stable salary, he had planned to rent his own place. The second toothbrush, then, must have belonged to someone else who had stayed with Lu after he left. This mysterious presence raised a chilling possibility. If the unknown guest was not the killer, then at the very least, he had seen the body or knew what happened, and yet chose to flee without reporting the crime. Such silence was in itself suspicious. At this point, Hong recalled something faint but important. On January 30th, as he was packing to leave, 2 visitors had come to Lu's apartment. They said they had just arrived in Shanghai and had nowhere to stay. During the conversation, Hong overheard only fragments, but enough to remember. One of them was a young man, about 20 or 21 years old, from Anhui province. His surname was Chen. Hong did not catch his full name, as Lu had only addressed him by surname. Hong also remembered that this Chen had worked briefly for Lu about 2 years earlier, before disappearing. Now, he had suddenly returned to Shanghai looking for work. At the time, Hong had been too preoccupied with wedding preparations to think more about it. Investigators immediately questioned older workers who had been with the company for more than 2 years. After some thought, they recalled a man named Xiangyou. But Chen was now about 26 or 27, not 20 or 21. He had only worked for a few months before quitting and had not been seen since. Why had he suddenly reappeared at Lu's apartment after such a long absence? What then was Chen Xiangyou's true intention? On February 21st, 2002, aided by local police in Anhui province, investigators traced his household registration to Juling village, Nanling County. Yet when they arrived, Chen was nowhere to be found. His family claimed he had gone to drink with relatives in a nearby hamlet. The officers pressed on, trudging through muddy village roads. At the relative's home, they were told Chen had already left, perhaps returning home. But when they doubled back, he was still gone. The repetitive chase felt like a deliberate game of shadows, as if someone within the family was warning Chen, shielding him from capture. To solidify suspicions, police showed photographs to Hong Bingwei, who immediately confirmed, yes, Chen Xiangyou was the man who appeared at Lu's apartment on January 30th. And the companion that day? Hong recognized him too. His name was Jianguo, Chen's closest friend. But by the time Lu's body was discovered, both Chen and Dai had vanished. This was no longer coincidence. The task force concluded that Chen and Dai were prime suspects. The next step was to uncover where Chen might be hiding. They mapped every close relative in the extended Chen family, paying special attention to households with strong daily ties. The trail led to one man, Huang Datai, Chen's maternal uncle. Huang had 4 sons, each living scattered across Huaxiang, Dunshan, and Shantui. Investigators believed these 5 households formed a network of safe havens for Chen, places he could slip into undetected while his pursuers chased ghosts. On February 22nd, under heavy rain, officers descended on Dunshan village. Mountain paths had turned slick. Patrol cars could go no further. Donning rubber boots, the task force sloshed through flooded fields, their flashlights cutting across the mist. The plan was clear. Simultaneously raid all 5 homes, leaving no time for warnings or escape. The first house searched belonged to Huang Datai himself. After knocking, officers surged inside, combing through every corner. No trace. One by one, they searched the sons' homes. Each raid was tense, the creak of doors, the barking of dogs, the pounding hearts of villagers startled awake. Yet the result was the same. Empty rooms, absent suspect. The carefully orchestrated ambush had yielded nothing. Chen had slipped away once more, vanishing into the countryside. Investigators realized he may have already fled far beyond Anhui, unlikely to return soon. Meanwhile, repeated visits to Chen's family brought no progress. Relatives maintained silence, either too loyal or too afraid to betray him. Without direct evidence, police could not press charges. The stalemate deepened until one overlooked thread caught their attention. Chen's wife, Xiao Wenai. Married for just over a year, she was 6 months pregnant with twins. Discreet surveillance revealed that on February 23rd, she visited a hospital for a prenatal check. While she waited for results, plainclothes officers quietly entered the doctor's office and outlined a delicate strategy. The doctor explained to Wenai that her twins suffered from twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, a rare but dangerous condition where one fetus receives more blood flow while the other is deprived. In truth, modern medicine today has methods to treat it, but 2 decades ago, such options were limited. The doctor emphasized that to avoid risk at delivery, the father should come in for blood tests and matching. The news terrified Wenai. She left the hospital shaken and hurried to a payphone in Urumqi, Xinjiang, where she placed a call to her husband. At that time, cell phones were rare luxuries. Most communication relied on landlines or public telephones. Families shared numbers. Store owners often rented their phones for small fees, fetching tenants when calls came. For many born in the 1970s or early 80s, such scenes were daily life. Once investigators traced the call to a small convenience shop inside a gated housing block in Urumqi, the breakthrough was at hand. Unlike shops on busy streets, this one served only the closed community of 3 apartment buildings behind a guarded archway. To reach Chen, one had to step inside that compound, where every outsider was noticed. The hunt was narrowing. If Chen truly lived outside, he could have easily used a public payphone along the busy streets. Why would he deliberately step into a gated community through guarded gates just to make a call? To investigators, the answer was clear. Chen must have been hiding right there inside the compound. He was too cautious to wander far while on the run. The task force quickly contacted the property management. They learned this was a newly built residential area, sparsely occupied. Only a handful of apartments had residents. 2 other buildings were still under construction, filled with local workers fitting interiors. None of these laborers matched Chen's description, and none had ever heard of him. That left the small convenience shop, the same one whose phone Chen had used and even given the number to his wife. Surely the shop owner or the clerks would have seen him, but strangely, when police showed them Chen's photograph, they all shook their heads. They claimed not to know him, not even recognizing his face. The shopkeeper explained how his call service worked. When someone phoned, he would shout into the work crews in the buildings, "So-and-so has a call," and whoever fit the name came running. With hundreds of workers rotating daily, he never remembered every face. Some even used aliases like secret codes. Perhaps Chen had done the same, making himself invisible in plain sight. Investigators realized the man must already be in the compound, but searching openly would risk spooking him. They decided to keep the inquiry quiet. The shopkeeper, surnamed Chu, was from Jiangsu province and had no ties to Chen, so he was unlikely to shield him. Police left behind Chen's photo and urged him, "If you see this man, contact us immediately." Barely half a day later, the call came. Chu reported that just minutes earlier, a man looking exactly like the photo had come in, bought a few small items, and slipped out through the north gate of the compound into Building 1. Chu had discreetly followed him before rushing back to phone the police. That same evening, officers encircled the northern entrance. The tension was heavy in the air as flashlights flickered in the drizzle, boots splashed through puddles, and radios crackled. Every shadow felt alive. Then came the breakthrough. On May 10th, 2002, exactly 2 months after the murder, Chen Xiangyou was finally arrested in Urumqi, Xinjiang, where he had been hiding as a construction worker. At 27 years old, Chen confessed his life had been full of hardship. He had dropped out after elementary school, worked countless odd jobs, and struggled to survive. Out of desperation, he and his closest friend Jianguo plotted to rob Lu, but robbery turned to murder. After killing him, the pair fled home, then agreed to escape to Xinjiang if the police came close. The vast western land offered anonymity, jobs, and places to hide. Yet by the time Shanghai police reached Anhui, Chen had already been tipped off by his relatives. At that moment, he was drinking at a cousin's home. Panic-stricken, he bolted alone, vanishing westward. As for Dai's whereabouts, Chen claimed he did not know. News of Chen's capture spread swiftly back to Anhui, making the search for Dai even harder. Dai Jianguo, then 25, unmarried, had a longtime girlfriend, Jin Shui. They had been childhood sweethearts, and their families had already met to discuss marriage plans at the end of the year. Investigators believed Jin Shui would certainly know something about his whereabouts. Police visited her, gently urging her to persuade Dai to surrender, or at least reveal his hideout. But she stood firm, claiming she knew nothing, insisting they were no longer in touch. Her denial frustrated the task force, yet background checks revealed something useful. She was known for her fiery jealousy, once even assaulting a cousin she suspected of having feelings for Dai. The detective saw an opportunity. While visiting Dai's relatives and neighbors, they deliberately let slip a rumor that Dai had already been located once, but had narrowly escaped. It was a trap, bait meant to stir Jin Shui's emotions, perhaps pushing her to act in ways that would expose him. Yet, as fate twisted, Dai Jianguo had found another young woman, strikingly beautiful, who secretly sheltered him. By the time investigators reached her residence, Dai had already disappeared once again, vanishing into the night. Some officers muttered bitterly this fugitive seemed not only cunning, but also strangely fortunate in charm, able to win companionship even while under pursuit. Days passed after rumors were planted, but Jin Shui remained unnervingly calm, carrying herself as if nothing weighed on her. The task force made a bold move. They withdrew visibly from the village, spreading word they had returned to Shanghai. The aim was psychological, to lull her into carelessness. Their patience paid off. In early May, Jin Shui quietly packed her belongings and purchased a train ticket bound for Huizhou, Guangdong province. In those early 2000s, tickets required no ID, no centralized system. All police knew was that she had queued for a ticket. They did not know which specific train she would board. Working with railway staff, investigators learned that from Anhui to Huizhou, there was one midday train and 2 afternoon departures. Uncertainty gripped them on which train would Jin Shui travel. Undercover officers shadowed her carefully. Finally, on May 3rd, she boarded train number 1019, departing at 11:06 in the morning. If all went as scheduled, she would arrive at Huizhou North Station at 6:30 on May 4th. The dawn of May 4th brought a joint operation with local police and railway agents. The task force braced themselves as the long-distance train slowed into Huizhou North. One by one, passengers poured out. The platform emptied, the whistle blew, and the train rumbled onward. But Jin Shui was nowhere to be seen. Confusion rippled through the unit. Had she intentionally misled them? Perhaps she had disembarked earlier, or purchased an additional ticket to continue further south. Or maybe by accident she had overslept, missing her stop. Theories spiraled, but no certainty emerged. Given her lack of experience with travel, police reasoned that she would likely disembark only at larger stations where trains lingered longer. If still aboard, the next stop was Dongguan East, a major hub. And if she planned to meet Dai, this would be the place. The situation turned into a race against time. If Jin Shui reached Dongguan before them, she could vanish into the city or make contact with Dai. Police scrambled, splitting their forces, One team remained in Huizhou North, another sped toward Dongguan. The direct provincial road spanned 70 to 80 kilometers, about 43 to 50 miles. But heavy roadwork and buses crowding the way slowed traffic dangerously. The commander made a snap decision. Take the detour toward Shenzhen, more than 100 kilometers over 60 miles but via highway, faster despite the distance. After more than an hour of tense driving, sirens off, only the roar of engines, they reached Dongguan Station. The train had already arrived 5 to 10 minutes earlier. Panic clawed at their nerves, but they pressed forward, spreading out through the station. Officers checked every corner, every phone booth. The square outside buzzed with travelers dragging luggage, vendors shouting, children crying. And then, near the southwest corner of the square, they saw her. A woman in a blue jacket, standing half hidden by a public payphone. It was Jin Shui. Without alerting her, plainclothes officers signaled reinforcements. The net was closing. Kim Shui picked up the receiver, but no words came out of her mouth. A moment later, she hung up. For a long while, she lingered at the public payphone, pacing back and forth with a bottle of water in her hand, her eyes scanning the crowd, as if expecting someone who never arrived. Investigators feared Jianguo had grown suspicious. From the very beginning, Dai had shown himself to be cunning, quick to sense danger, and always ready to alter his plans. If he felt the slightest risk, he would vanish like smoke. After more than an hour, the payphone rang again. This time, Kim rushed forward and lifted the receiver. From their distance, police could not hear the conversation. They only saw her gripping the phone tightly, her lips moving in hushed words. The task force grew certain. Following Kim would eventually lead them to Dai. Finishing the call, she grabbed her bag, walked across the square, and approached a motorcycle taxi, speaking briefly with the driver likely about the fare or the direction. Yet instead of climbing on, she turned back to the payphone and dialed once again. A plainclothes officer edged closer, straining to catch her words, but she spoke in a thick local dialect, incomprehensible to him. Moments later, she suddenly abandoned the booth, boarded a long-distance bus departing for Linma. The police scrambled. Only 3 officers managed to board the same bus. Others scattered around the station had to leap onto motorcycle taxis and chase after it. The pursuit looked chaotic. Official cars weaving through traffic, motorbikes speeding in rain-slicked streets, all following the lumbering bus down the provincial road. 15 minutes later, the bus reached Changping town. It paused at the station, lingered briefly, then rolled onward. Kim remained inside, calm and motionless. By 1 in the afternoon, on May 4th, the bus pulled into Linma Station, its final stop. Kim stepped off. Officers, hearts pounding, followed at a careful distance. There, a man in a red jacket approached her. They exchanged a few words and turned to leave together. The plainclothes officer's eyes locked on him. The features matched perfectly. This was Dai Jianguo. They struck instantly, wrestled him to the ground, and snapped on the cuffs. Kim Shui froze in shock, her face pale, unable to utter a word as her lover was dragged away. The second fugitive was captured at last, in Guangdong province. The following day, Dai was escorted by train back to Shanghai to face interrogation, scene reconstruction, and trial preparations. Under questioning, both Chen Xiangyou and Dai Jianguo admitted their guilt, laying bare the path that led them from petty hustles to murder. Their joint confessions revealed the grim story. Dai had once made money selling pirated CDs in the late 1990s, when disc players were in nearly every household. At first, business was good, but by the early 2000s, with tighter crackdowns and the rise of the internet, the trade collapsed. Out of work and unwilling to do hard labor, Dai drifted. Seeking an easier path, he turned to his close friend Chen. But Chen, too, had fallen into despair, having gambled away his entire year's savings during the New Year holiday of 2001. By late January 2002, The two were desperate for cash. The Spring Festival loomed, with social obligations, family expectations, and no money in their pockets. Chen thought of Lu, his former employer. Lu lived alone, earned well, and was known to be frugal. Surely cash must be hidden in his home. The two friends agreed to strike. Their first attempt was planned for late January, but when they arrived, another man, Hong Bingwei, was there, preparing to travel. Lu introduced Chen as an old colleague from Anhui. Alarm bells rang. If Hong remembered him, the police could trace them later. The plan was abandoned, but as the festival drew closer, desperation deepened. By February 7th, just 3 days before Lunar New Year's Eve, Dai pressed Chen to act. He could not bear the shame of visiting his girlfriend's family empty-handed. They armed themselves with duct tape and went once more to Lu's door. Chen entered first, spinning a story. He had missed his train home and needed to stay one more night. Lu welcomed him warmly, even cooking dinner. That night, while Lu slept in his small bedroom, Chen brushed his teeth, waiting. Close to 11 at night, Dai slipped inside. The stage was set. That detail of the toothbrush remained haunting, a brush already smeared with paste yet abandoned hastily, inside the face powder container. It belonged to Chen, left behind when he rushed to open the door for Dai. Their plan was simple: wait until dawn, strike when Lu was in his deepest sleep. But fatigue overwhelmed them, and both drifted off. At 7 in the morning, they woke abruptly, panic rushing in. They stormed into Lu's bedroom, binding his hands and feet with duct tape, sealing his mouth, then tightening the tape around his neck. In minutes, Lu was lifeless. They ransacked his room, found the key to his television cabinet, but nerves betrayed them. Even with the key inserted, their shaking hands fumbled. Eventually, they broke the lock. From the drawer, they seized over 2,000 yuan in cash, roughly $300, and a mobile phone. Without hesitation, they fled Shanghai, retreating to their hometown for the Lunar New Year. For a full week, Lu's body remained undiscovered. Only on the second day of the new year did neighbors, alarmed by the silence, realize tragedy had struck. By December 2002, the law caught up. Both Dai Jianguo and Chen Xiangyou were sentenced to death for murder and robbery. The court's decision drew little sympathy. Society saw not men driven to crime by desperation, but individuals warped by vanity and idleness. Dai's psychology was dissected. He was a man allergic to change, lazy yet craving comfort. Once, selling pirated CDs had given him easy income. When the market collapsed, he refused to adapt, to learn a trade, to work an honest job. Instead, he clung to resentment, chasing quick gains to preserve face before his girlfriend and family. Festive traditions worsened the pressure. In Chinese culture, Lunar New Year is a time to visit a girlfriend's family, exchange gifts, show prosperity. For a young man with empty pockets, it meant humiliation. That anxiety pushed Dai toward Chen, yet his choice of partner doomed him. Chen had squandered his money gambling, equally broke, equally reckless. The initial target was Lu, not out of hatred, but calculation. Alone, frugal, financially stable, he seemed perfect prey. Their motive was shallow, not hunger, not survival, but the need to save face. That fragile pride, amplified by the weight of holiday customs, became deadly. Reflecting further, this tragedy echoes other cases where kindness turned fatal. Lu, in his generosity, allowed an old acquaintance to stay the night and paid with his life. It recalls a notorious case in Hanoi in 1999, when the Kim Sin jewelry shop massacre left 4 dead. That crime too began with the trust of offering shelter, ending in horror. The lesson stings. Kindness must have boundaries. When someone you barely know reappears suddenly during holidays, especially asking for shelter, caution is vital. If doubt nags at your heart, refuse politely. Suggest a guest house nearby, even offer to pay for it, or casually mention their presence to neighbors, ensuring their identity is known. Such small acts might appear dark intentions. Criminal minds often betray themselves. Uneasy silence, distracted behavior, forced smiles. Observing those cracks may save lives. In the end, vigilance is not the absence of kindness, but the shield that allows kindness to survive.